Can you imagine creating one of the biggest moments of your career almost by accident? Well, that's exactly what happened to Tom Petty when he came up with his classic 1989 hit Free Fallin'. Yeah, one of his defining tracks first came about as a bit of a joke and sort of just snowballed. So let's go through the full story behind the song. And if you love classic rock history like me, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to join our pack. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this song. It's a road trip staple, a karaoke classic, and it's featured in more TV shows and movies than you can shake a stick at. It's probably no surprise that it's Tom Petty's highest charting solo single. Upon its release, it went to number 7 in the US Billboard 100. His only work to top that number was his famous collaboration with Stevie Nicks, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, that made it to number 3. Oddly, the song did even better in New Zealand and Canada, breaking the top 5 in both. I would imagine that long scenic drives and car radio stations would have a lot to do with that. But the thing is, he never even really meant to write it. It's often referred to as the song he wrote as a joke. Let's take a look back at the time the song was written to get some perspective on this. So Tom Petty was already a successful artist by this point, having been active since the late 60s. For years, he'd been the frontman of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, who had released such classics as I Need to Know and Listen to Her Heart.
Yeah, she's gonna listen to her heart. It's gonna tell her what to do.
They were a gold standard band in their own right. Despite this, there was some tension building in the background. Perhaps unsurprisingly given the name, Petty was often seen as the leader of the band. In fact, the other members are sometimes referred to as touring or recording musicians, which would understandably rub you the wrong way. There were frequent disagreements and arguments behind closed doors that went on for years, due to a mixture of musical and personal conflicts and reportedly drug abuse. Another source of tension would be that Petty also explored solo work and projects outside of the band. The 1989 album Full Moon Fever, which featured Free Fallin', might have been his first official solo album, but he'd been actively pursuing other avenues since at least 1988, when he formed the travelling Wilburys. This was a supergroup stacked with huge names, of course, including Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, George Harrison, and Jeff Lynne.
We're going to the end of the line.
And it was with the travelling Wilburys bandmate Jeff Lynne, during a jam session one day, that he accidentally came up with the beginnings of Free Fallin'. In fact, Jeff Lynne would become instrumental in the creation of the song. On the face of it, they might seem an odd pairing, given their different musical styles, but with two musicians of their caliber coming together, they were bound to find some common ground. And they did. The story goes that the two were hanging out, thinking about writing a song, when Petty stumbled across a catchy riff on the keyboard that caught Jeff Lynne's attention. I just happened to hit on that main riff, the intro of the song, and I think Jeff said something like, "That's a really good riff, but there's one chord too many." Petty followed his advice, dropped a chord, played it again, and then it happened. Really just to amuse Jeff, honestly. I just sang that first verse, then he starts laughing. Honestly, I thought I was just amusing Jeff, but then I got to the chorus of the song, and he leaned over to me and said the word, "free falling." They played around for a moment, Lynne suggesting that he go a bit higher on the chorus. As I said earlier, he really was instrumental in making this song. I went to sing that, and he said, "No, take your voice up and see how that feels." So I took my voice up an octave or two, but I couldn't get the whole word in. So I sang free, then free falling. And we both knew at that moment that I'd hit on something pretty good. It was that fast. And just like that, a star was born, or rather a song. Isn't it amazing how many of rock history's greatest tracks just come together out of nothing, or from an accident? It's brilliant. So the guys knew they were onto something, and over the course of the evening, Petty wrote another verse, finished off the song, and by the next day, had it ready enough to show Lynne. Lynne was immediately impressed, and they were so excited, they immediately took it to Mike Campbell's studio and recorded it right there and then. Now, if that name's familiar, by the way, that would be because he played guitar, keys, and backing vocals in the Heartbreakers. He would go on to play on every single one of the tracks on Full Moon Fever. So that was really that. But a fun fact about this album, they came up with one of the other hits on it just as quickly, while Free Fallin' was being mixed. While the technicians were working on the technical bits, the duo took their guitars into a little booth and did it again. Jeff and I took our guitars into a little vocal booth they had off to the side, and we wrote I Won't Back Down while they were mixing Free Fallin'. So we came out of that saying, we think we've got another one. And we went back and did that one in the next day or two.
And I won't back down.
The two were obviously on a roll at this point. Although it might have come together quickly and have simple bones, Free Fallin' is far from a boring song. But what or who is the song about then? Well, it's easy to think it's about a girl, given the lyrics and of course the music video. The lyrics tell of a classic love gone lost, with a sweet girl getting her heart broken. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. She's a good girl, crazy about Elvis, loves horses and her boyfriend too. A pretty standard first verse, although I'm not really sure what made Jeff Lynne laugh. Maybe you had to be there. The second verse carries on in the same way. And I'm a bad boy cause I don't even miss her. I'm a bad boy for breaking her heart. The music video also follows a pretty young girl at a pool party. And then again, skateboarding. A fairly obvious metaphor for feelings of freedom and youth. You never actually see any heartbreak. So it seems obvious, but funnily enough, Tom Petty has said there was no girl, and that's not directly what it's about. I don't know who the girl in Free Fallin' is. I was having to make this drive every day. The studio was in the Valley, and I was driving from Beverly Hills to the Valley and back every day. And on that drive, I just used to look at Ventura Boulevard, and just life's great pageant was going on up and down that street. And I tried to grab a little bit of these characters on the road, and it was kind of how I saw it. And this kind of makes sense when you look at that last verse. All the vampires walking through the valley move west down Ventura Boulevard, and all the bad boys are standing in the shadows, and the good girls are home with broken hearts. Viewed through what he said, you can see that that's less about a specific girl and more a reflection of the place. And of course, the chorus doesn't take a lot of explaining either. Now, what kind of a hit single would this be if it didn't face some record label misgivings? Honestly, I think if you were trying to release a song in this era and your label didn't like it, you must have known it was a good song. Right on form, when they took the almost finished album to their record label, MCA, they pumped the brakes. What was interesting is that after 7 or 8 songs, they took it to the record company and they, MCA, said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really hear a single." That original version included Free Fallin' and I Won't Back Down, by the way, which would eventually help push the album to 11 platinum certifications between the US and Canada. So it did alright in the end. But before it could be released, Lynne and Petty were told to go and write some more songs, and luckily they never had much trouble coming up with tracks. So there you have it. One of the most recognisable songs of the 80s came about as a joke, and almost wasn't released at all. Now, Jeff Lynne actually featured on the channel not too long ago. Turns out he's not a big fan of ELO's biggest hit, Mr. Blue Sky. There's a really interesting story behind that song. You can click over there to watch it next.